A very warm welcome to this 12th day of September 2023 here in Nairobi, Kenya. It's a very chilly day. It's a very chilly evening. And nimesikia wengine wakisema washapata duvet za kuprepare for the El Nino. So guys, the season is here. It's cold, yes, but we have to keep our agenda pushing. Welcome to Kenya Explained. I am your host, Esther Nyonje. Now we've seen notable events happening, and we are here to catch it all up. And in studio today, I have my wonderful guests, David, Maina.
Thank you very much, Esther, for this invite.
You can tell us a bit about yourself, maybe.
I'm the national chairman of Vijana na Kazi. We're a lobby group that was formed by young leaders from all over the country. And we came together in 2019, 2020 in order to support His Excellency William Ruto, who was at the time the deputy president. Mm-hmm. And basically we've, from that time, been supporting his agenda in different capacities, all the way through to the elections and even afterwards. And for right now, we're focused on pushing the party's agenda, activating our networks, and making sure that what we promised the youth are things that we can actually deliver on, and with also the participation of the younger Kenyans.
Mm-hmm. Chairman Vijana wa Kazi UDA.
Vijana na Kazi, yes.
Karibu sana. And lovely Miss Ruth Bolo. A brief introduction. Hi.
Thank you so much for hosting me. Mm-hmm. I'm glad to finally be sitting on a very, very pro-government person. Just from that introduction already, he was prompting me.
Are you scared?
I'm excited to go into the conversation. I have lots of questions as a common citizen, so I look forward.
I share your sentiments.
Yes, so I have been in the governance space for quite some time. I'm currently the chairperson of the Young Women Leaders Connect board. So basically bringing together young women who want to be included in the governance and democratic space, and ensuring that we have as many young women as possible proactively participating in the democratic processes that are there. So I'm glad to be here.
Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for making time for us today. You can share this live broadcast to as many people as possible, because this show won't be interactive without you, our lovely viewers. And you can find us on Facebook at New Day TV. Share in your comments, your sentiments, your points of concern. Let us talk, let us interact. David, nasikia unauza sera ya serikali sana.
Itabidi, when William Ruto assumed office, we assumed that because the elections had been finished and this matter had even gone to the Supreme Court, that people would allow the government some space to work. But it wasn't a few months into office where we saw people deciding to wear sufurias on their head, taking young people to the streets to fight with police, telling us that they don't care, where the price of unga was. At that point, it was 150. They're saying even if it's 100, they'll still wear sufurias. So at that point, we have to balance the politics and governance, because even as we look back in our country, the darkest period after independence was the post-election violence, 2007, 2008. And as a youth leader, we lost so many young lives. So what can we do to prevent such a thing from happening again? Because of, practically the same politicians. It's the same politicians who are there then who are here today, minus the youths who are lost every election cycle. So I don't like to criticize Kibaki, but I must criticize this one thing, and he did not focus on politics enough. Yeah, he did a very good job for this country, showed us what's possible in terms of governance, reformed the civil sector, figured out how to.
He was a president. Why do you expect him to focus on politics when he is on the seat representing each Kenyan citizen that voted or did not vote for him?
But a president is a chief politician. Even a position like the Supreme Court Chief Justice is a political appointment. That is a political seat.
That's an office. The presidency is an office. When it comes to the office, put the politics aside.
Esther, I'm surprised he's saying that.
Putting politics aside, because these are political positions. This is political power that they wield. Yeah, and ultimately he's responsible for the well-being of this country, for the security of this country. That's what the meaning of the sword is. He's supposed to defend the order and security of this country. So when we have people saying that they're going to remove duly elected government, when we have people saying that, you're not telling young people, Vijana fire. When we have people saying, go fight the police, that there are certain kind of rewards that you'll get out of this, we have to make sure that the country is secure. And this is not just an issue in Kenya. I'm sure you've been following the events in France. It got to a point where people wanted to burn down the country. And they had to put their foot down and decide what to do. Now, I know maybe you want to tell us that maybe the police might have handled this issue differently, but look at America. People here in Kenya say that Raila cannot be arrested. Trump has been arrested a few times by now.
Who says he cannot be arrested?
Yeah, he's been arrested 3-4 times by now.
Who says he cannot?
So at the end of the day, these are things that happen in democracies. That is politics that is happening in the US. The politics that is happening here is even better. And so I actually agree with these bipartisan discussions. If this is what it takes to prevent the deaths of young people on the streets, then I support this agenda. Let's sit down and discuss. After all, we're all Kenyans. And this is, in fact, going back to your point, this is how we unite our people, make people feel heard, give them a place to, express what's in their hearts in an undestructive manner. So I think it's the president who has shepherded this process until where we are, because he's the one who called for the first bipartisan talks, which were then sabotaged by Raila Odinga. And I've heard him again threatening that by the end of the month he can go to the street again in case
they fail.
The talks collapse.
Or they fail to agree. Ruth,
Esther,
I see you have a burning point.
I have burning points.
Tell us.
I'm worried when he says that the president should be engaging in politics, because we have been seeing appointed and elected members of government continuing as if the elections are tomorrow, whereas we've just concluded the elections. What we should be doing now is focusing on the agenda that they gave us and delivering that agenda and those promises to the people of Kenya. That is one. Two, when you are in government, you cannot start from a point of defense, because then you're always reacting and not acting, which is a lot of what is happening. So opposition goes and complains about UNGA, you rush and fix UNGA and give a temporary elastoplast solution to it. There are complaints about this, you rush and put a temporary. Whereas there are promises that you made. For example, there was a promise on gender, 50% cabinet positions. That is something that the president himself had the ability to do without necessarily going through all the policies. But now we have 8 out of 23. That is not 50%. So instead of focusing on the promises that you gave to Kenyans and ensuring that there's infrastructure to put that together, you're busy defending and going about politics. So I strongly disagree when we say that the president should be involved in politics. I strongly disagree, because what then happens is that you begin to focus on your political agenda as opposed to the socio-economic agenda. So we need to really be very, very clear on what we want also as Kenyans. We need to be very honest about that. And when it comes to arresting the former prime minister, I believe the president has the ability to say that if someone has, broken the law, they should be arrested. So if Kenya Kwanza feels that the former prime minister is breaking the law in whatever way, I am busy wondering, why hasn't he been arrested? Because as a common citizen, if I broke the law today, the police would not even think twice. So why is it different? If you really think that he's committed a crime, why isn't he behind bars?
That forms the basis of our conversation today. Naambia leo kutakuwa kumoto. Tell me what you agree so far. David says that the president, I don't want to misquote you, but you say that the president should also play some politics. And Ruth here says that the president should not be affiliated in any politics once he is in that chair. And that, as we say, the topic today, we are looking at the status of where we are right now. We have the National Dialogue Committee. The talks are going on. And just to say that, David, to you, do you think there is any goodwill by the leaders, especially by the leaders from Kenya Kwanza, in the ongoing talks that we are seeing? The deputy president is out here not giving a goodwill or showing a good heart of the talks, because he said that there is no need for these talks. And he says that he represents the voices of other leaders and most Kenyans. Now, these talks are initially supposed to provide a basis for the political bad manners we've had. That's what I believe. But now if a leader is speaking that way, then what is the purpose of the whole talks?
Before we get into the talks, I would just like to touch on one issue she mentioned. She said that the president did not appoint 50% of the cabinet as women. I think you have to look at cabinet as beyond just the CSs to the PSs as well. And when you count all of them, you'll see that the gender 2/3 rule was achieved. So if he said 50% of gender, then maybe I can give him a 75%.
50%. Let's be
the
clear.
promise was 50%, but he adhered to the 2/3 gender rule.
But he did not deliver on his
maybe
promise.
if we don't give him 100% marks on that, we can give him 75%, which is an A-. So let's give the president an A- on gender. And on top of that, the fact that 2/3 gender is in bipartisan. This is the president's direct effort because he also promised that he would figure out a mechanism to make sure that we can implement two-thirds gender rule in Kenya.
But David, to cut you short, why do we have to put the two-third gender rule in the agenda talks when it's something in the constitution that needs to be implemented?
The problem, Esther, is who is supposed to implement that? Because it's Kenyans who vote. Kenyans have voted in 2013, in 2017, and in 2022. Kenyans at the ballot do not implement that rule themselves. So the question is, at what level do we do this now? Do we go to the political parties? Because in the political parties, each party wants to win. Yeah. So if you allow the people on the ground to pick who's the most popular candidates, as we did in UDA, we did nominations that were run from the ground. People voted just like the way they vote on election day. Yeah. And the people that they give us do not qualify for that two-thirds gender rule. Yeah. So at what level do we fix this? This is why we're looking at a legal intervention so that we can figure out whether it's at the ballot or at the party level. So for gender issues, I think we have to give the president an A- on that one. Now on bipartisan talks, you remember it was a Sunday when things were really, really tense. There was going to be, was it the mother of all demonstrations or the father of all? I don't know, they keep on changing. You know, the theme is always changing, yeah. So it was one of those, and the president came out, and to the surprise of the entire nation, including the opposition,
and extended an
he
olive
said
branch.
that, could you come sit, we have a bipartisan talk. And everybody thought there was going to be a handshake out of that. And I think it's within that kind of context that His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua comes out to say that there's not going to be an outcome to these talks. Because maybe one side is coming in thinking about handshakes. The handshake will not happen. There will not be political appointments out of these talks. But if you want to discuss the agenda of Kenyans, this is the right forum for it. Can we please not go back to wearing sufurias on the head and fighting with the police and, you know, stopping people's hustles? In fact, there's a Shushaina on, is it Moi Avenue? His name is Omondi. And I asked him, what is the effect of this mandamano on you? And he told me that every time there's mandamano, he goes home with nothing. He lives hand to mouth. He has a family of 5. And he told me that, in fact, when there's mandamano, they come and they take his goods. So he has to figure out in advance where he's going to put his goods or not come at all. And if they find him there, they take his goods and force him to do mandamano. So you get caught up in the police and everything like that. So if you're doing mandamano 3 times a week, you've taken away 60% of a person's time to earn money. And people are living hand to mouth. And at the end of the day, as we can see, when they finish riding around in the V8s, air-conditioned, drinking whiskey in those cars, when they finish that, they go and wear suits and go to bipartisan talks. But the guys on the street continue where they are.
Okay, so what is the end game of the National Dialogue Committee talks?
For us on our side, we thought that we had finished litigating these issues when we had given our manifestos to the people. Yeah, the people made their decision, and the court upheld the decision of the people. But if they insist that we have to continue talking, that's fine. Let's discuss these issues. And I'm glad that the talks have now been opened to Mwananchi through public participation, because now there are over 100 petitions.
And 45, yeah.
Yeah, that have been brought in. So the people will also have something to say. And I'm quite surprised that so many petitions came from people when Azimio was saying that they're speaking for the people. So which people are these who are bringing these petitions? It seems like Azimio talks about issues that are not connected to the ground. Yeah.
So Ruth, with the statements made by the Deputy President and some of his supporters from the UDA side, do you think there's a goodwill behind the talks from these leaders?
First of all, I have to give credit where due. I have to give credit to the president for extending the olive branch. That I have to do, because it shows that he's looking at the bigger picture and the well-being of this country. But the truth of the matter is, and we have to be honest, David, when the deputy president, who is second in command in this nation, and takes charge whenever the president is out of this country, says and utters such harsh words in public, I am left wondering, what is the fate of this nation should anything happen when the right president is out of the country? So when he stands up to utter such words, and he is not rebuked, and we've not seen this from just him, we saw this from Moses Kuria as well. We saw such utterances from key people in government, but no one, not even the president, came out to say that these utterances are wrong and something should be done about them. As a common citizen, when I see the two forces, there is a saying that says, is it ndovu wawili ama ni kifaru wawili wakipigana?
Nyasi humia.
Sasa sisi ndio nyasi. As the common citizens, we are the ones that suffer. And why we suffer is because there are these two forces who are both putting their egos first, because this is just ego and pride. So when the deputy president comes out to say such words, really it shows that either there is a divide in the Kenya Kwanza government, and maybe David should tell us more about that. But as a common citizen, that is what I think, because I am seeing my president saying that I am extending an olive branch, I'm putting together a committee, and I'm willing to listen to what the opposition is saying. But his deputy, on the other hand, is saying all these harsh words, we do not want to sit with opposition. We will use the same force that you are giving us. We are going to do this, and issuing all kinds of threats. Then I believe that either there is a divide between in Kenya, in the Kenya Kwanza government, which would then leave me very worried, or two, the deputy president is saying what the president doesn't want to say. So we need to know what the position is, because if the second issue is the case, then really it's a waste of time to purport to have a national dialogue committee, because they are doing zero work.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, talk to us in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts about the future of what does it portend for the ongoing National Dialogue Committee. Do you think they will help in solving the political bad manners and the political ethic and the political environments that we've had? Is it going to solve our problems? Because David, there are serious issues in those talks. We have of course, they're calling for the audit of the 2022 general elections. We have the restructuring of the IEBC, the entrenchment of NGCDF. What about cost of living? Cost of living is also there. So these are very serious things that are not just going to be a solution right now, but even provide a roadmap for future generations, future elections, future carrying of things. So how do you just put it aside and say, I don't see the need for these talks?
One thing that worries me about Azimio is they refuse to use institutions. We go and do elections and they say we don't trust these elections, let's go to court. You go to court and take hot air to court in cartons, a lorry full of hot air. And you say, no, the court, I don't know, has problems. And then you have members in parliament. In fact, they were telling us how they had the parliamentary majority after the election. Now you don't want to use parliament. You're telling your MPs to boycott bills that are being passed in parliament so that you can go and do mandamano and create a new structure that you can now use to propel your interests. So they're always moving away from institutions, whereas we are trying to move towards institutions. And I think it's within that context that you might hear that maybe these talks are going nowhere because there's an institution to deal with all these things, and that's Parliament. And that's why even this bipartisan talk is going to be structured within an act of Parliament. It all goes back to Parliament. We already have the institutions that need to do this work. If it's CDF, that's work for Parliament. Even constitution, even if it was to be a constitution change, this is work that's done in Parliament. And this is because of BBI. When they were doing BBI and they took it to the courts, one thing that came out, and we were defending this so strongly, was, what were we calling it? We were calling it the basic structure doctrine. Yeah, we were saying that the constitution has a basic structure that cannot be altered. But because they pushed it to court and used whichever means they used, they threw out the basic structure doctrine. What that means now is that Parliament can change any kind of law that they want without a referendum. That's an outcome of the BBI process that they were trying to run through. So any of these issues, including two-thirds gender rule, can happen in Parliament right now, according to the law the way it is. So that's why sometimes, it's difficult to understand, what is the purpose of this bipartisan talks other than creating positions for certain leaders. And, the pointlessness is this. William Ruto has been clear since he got into office that, he believed in the office of the leader of opposition, because even when this 2013 Katiba was being written, Raila Odinga was the prime minister. He had a lot of influence in that government. William Ruto was in the opposition. But William Ruto said that we need to have an office of a leader of opposition in that thing. Raila thought that he was going to become the president, so his people refused to create that office because it might strengthen the opposition. Today, the shoe is on the other foot, and they want that office of the leader of opposition, something that William Ruto has agreed with since day one.
So why isn't it there?
He offered this last year. Last year, September, October, he was telling them, office of the leader of opposition, and we figure out this two-thirds gender rule. This is what he said even before Mandamano started. And now that Mandamano is over, they're coming back and saying, okay, now tell us about this office of leader of opposition and gender two-thirds as well as CDF. These are things that were spoken about in the first few rallies after he assumed office. So it's just a long and pointless way of coming back to the same thing. So that's why sometimes people can be tired. And then again, how do you come and say you want to do bipartisan, but you're still threatening to do mandamano? And there are a lot of issues in this country. Politics is not just politics; it also affects our economy. Right now, mambo ni matatu, yeah, and it's gotten to this point because these guys have had political cover throughout. So you have your problems, you call somebody, comes and creates some noise, and your issues go through. It goes to court. You know, I remember one time Raila Odinga went and did a press conference in was it in Western or in Nyanza, rebuking the courts for making a decision. And we were wondering if you're in the opposition, if you become president, what's going to happen? You know. So once again, for us, I think it's about institutions, and on their side, I think they have their supporters as well. Yeah? But please, can we go back to our institutions, because you have representation in Parliament, you have representation everywhere. Yeah.
All right. And to you, Ruth, and attaching that to the National Dialogue Committee talks, there's also the issue about political parties discipline. We've seen what has happened. The ODM has issued what is it called? They barred them from the party.
The disciplinary motions that they sent to the members.
Yeah, to bar some members that were voted in by the ODM party, and then they went into their offices, their respective offices, and they changed. They swifted. They went to a different party. Now, in relation to that, and even creating political party discipline, do you feel like this situation about potential reforms, do you feel like this situation can be improved, that we get to a point of having political party discipline?
Before I touch on that, allow me to respond to something you said about Parliament and all this goodwill that the president is showing. There's one thing to show goodwill, and it's another thing completely to implement it, to act on the goodwill that you're showing. Those are two different things. That is one. Two, we also need to know these institutions that he's talking about, are they really independent institutions? Not just by name, but by the nature of how they carry out their activities. Now, to your question, political parties discipline has got to be enforced. It is only in Kenya, right now in East Africa, where you will wake up and decide, I am fed up of UDA, I'm going to Jubilee. I'm fed up of Jubilee, I'm going to KANU. I'm fed up of KANU, I'm going to ODM. And if you look at our immediate neighbors, let's use Tanzania and Uganda. In Tanzania, if you are not in Chadema, you're in government. If you're not in CCU, you're in Chadema. Of course, there are other smaller, quote-unquote, political parties. But by the time someone is making the decision to move, it is a well-thought-through decision with the ability and the acceptance of, yes, I am ready to face the repercussions of me moving from one party to the other, even if it means me not being voted in again by the electorate. In Uganda, we've got the ANT party that was newly formed. It broke off from one of the opposition parties. And what happened? Majority of the members of parliament didn't go back in because the people said, you've formed a new political party. Now you need to tell us, this new political party, we need to understand what is it about. But in Kenya, every election cycle, we have a new political party that is springing up. Right now, we are almost getting to 100 political parties in a country of 45 million Kenyans, and not all 45 million are voting. So really, what are we doing? The thing is very simple. If as an elected member of parliament, you feel that you cannot serve the party, because when you run with a party, ideally you're subscribing, one, to their ideologies, two, you're subscribing to the manifesto of that party, and three, you're subscribing to the agenda of that party. Of course, there are places where you may not be 100% aligned to what the party is pushing for in parliament, especially if it was not in its previous agenda, right? But if the agenda of the party has been clear from the word go, and the battle lines, quote unquote, have clearly been drawn, and you cross them, and you feel you're no longer part of that party, it is very simple. Why don't you resign and go back to the ballot? Because, as you have said, you have been elected by the people. So if it is the people who have elected you, it should be very simple. Go back to the ballot. Let them re-elect you because they believe in you, and the party has got very little influence on whether or not you go back. Resign. Resign and openly go to the party of your choice. That is one. Two, whereas I agree that we also have to put certain moratoriums on political parties so that then they do not have the monopoly of bullying members of parliament, even if a decision is wrong. We must also enforce discipline in these parties, one. And two, we must also reduce the number of political parties that are there, honestly speaking.
You think so?
I really think that we should reduce the number of political parties for the simple reason that we need parties of meaning. If it is Green Congress Party, and we know Green Congress Party is pushing for a greener Kenya, it is pushing for a certain agenda, then let me go to Green Congress Party because of that agenda. If I know that KANU is a conservative party and they're pushing for the conservatism, even in their ideologies, let me go there because I subscribe to either fiscal conservatism or something around that. If I am a liberal person, let me know that I'm going to this party. If I am a Democrat, let me know I'm going to WIPA or UDA or whatever party it is, because that is what they represent. Now tell me, the Service Party, for example, and I don't have anything against them, just to put it out there. It's a very new party, right? Tujibebe Party, what is Tujibebe about? You know, we need to be able to know that these parties that are there subscribe to these ideologies. It is only then that we will be able to curtail some of these abrupt movements. And we also have to be very, very strict, because a lot of what is happening is, if I know that a political party is strong in a certain area and I don't subscribe to the ideologies of that party, I will make sure I go through the party primaries and I'll make sure I get elected. But after that, I'm doing everything contrary to what that party is saying. So why exactly did I vie with that party? It brings us back to the issue that David was saying of opposition thinking that they have X numbers, or government thinking that they have X numbers, only to go there and find kwa ground mambo ni tofauti. So it makes it very difficult. If I voted you in because I am aligned to UDA's agenda, for example, and you are part of UDA, and you go there and you now want to be in opposition, then you need to go back to the ballot, because that is not why I voted you in. You're deceiving me as an electorate. So I really think that we need to put more stringent measures when it comes to parties. And I do applaud ODM for that. The only thing is that now we need some judiciary backing when it comes to political parties, because what has been happening, and I'll tell you, it's not just in terms of going to see, because someone has gone to see a party leader or any of those political motions. It is also because sometimes there's an amount of money that these people subscribe to the party, so that then the parties are able to sustain themselves. You find that these elected and nominated members are not giving this subscription. When they go to court, this same case will run for 5, 6, 7 years, even after the person has finished serving and even either left politics or has gone to a different position. So you're left wondering, if the courts are not supporting our political parties, then how do we, one, use the same courts to make sure that political parties can actually be put to count?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Ruth says the law is very clear, and she says that we need to look at the regulation of the number of political parties that are cropping up in the country. And when you talked about judicial backing, I am looking for this post where the court today actually gave the ODM party, stopped ODM party from disbarring these people from their respective political parties.
Yes.
So maybe there's court backing there.
Yes.
And David, to you, what does this portend for these leaders who vied with these political parties and got into office and swayed to another political party on terms of we are going to look for development, we have to talk to the president? Does development come from State House?
If we look at the history of this country, Kenya is a country of defectors, built by defectors. Yeah.
So we
Everybody
should keep
has
on the
defected
culture?
at some point. Yeah. Nyayo was in KANU, he went back to KANU. Yeah. Kibaki was in KANU and he ran with the DP. Yeah. Uhuru was also in KANU and Jubilee. William Ruto was in ODM. Yeah. And now he's the president with UDA.
And then Jubilee, and then UDA.
And Raila has also been, he's also had his moments of party indiscipline. It was in the early 90s when he went against his father very famously. Yeah. And went and carved out his own space. He went against his own father. Yeah. Now he's called Baba and his children are going against him. So that's how it's a funny twist of fate. But I don't think that you can take away the constitutional freedom of conscience from someone just because they're an MP or they're an MCA. There's no space for you to implement an Azimio manifesto because Azimio is not in power. How will you implement an Azimio manifesto and Azimio is not in power? The government's agenda is bottom-up economic transformation agenda. Yeah. And development is happening along those lines. Right now, in Western Kenya, the fish farmers in Western Kenya are now exporting fish to Italy. Do we want the MPs on the ground to tell their people now, because this was not in the Azimio manifesto, can you please reject this agenda? Is that possible? No. The governors who go and speak with the president, even when the president is on duty with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, private sector and such, and the governor will take that opportunity, and she's an ODM governor, to say that we need a cotton manufacturing plant here. This is what we need to help us. Where else would she have raised that issue? Because there's an association of manufacturers, private sector, investors, and the president. Where else could she raise this issue? So it's fine for governors to go and have these conversations because they're high up there.
Executive.
But should you, as an MCA or an MP,
Legislators,
go to look for development for your people? Yeah, because the president is on duty when you see him. You're not going to see him in a restaurant to have tea, yeah, or to plot against OD. You're going to see a president who is on duty. So if you go to look for ways to help your people, because there's so many issues in this country that maybe ODM will not be in a
But what are the constitutional agenda mandates of the two?
One example. You find that there are land grabbers in, let's say, your ward as an MCA. Yeah, there's no room for even a public toilet. How are you going to deal with land grabbers from ODM? Can you even get in touch with the leadership? You can't. So if the president can see you, yeah, that's somebody who can help you fix your issues where you are. And then again, let's ask ourselves, how did these politicians find themselves in ODM and Azimio? You remember very well that before the elections, there was a lot of coercion that was happening. And you hear, party discipline has to be coerced. Yeah. This same coercion was happening at a national level. So a lot of people went and joined Azimio, but they were not really in Azimio. They wanted to be in Kenya Kwanza. And you saw them coming over. And that exodus is not yet over, because ours is a coalition of the willing. Nobody is forced, nobody is paid. You come because you believe in what we're saying, what we're talking about. These young leaders see an opportunity for them to become something better. Even Simba Arati, who's been given a position, goes to State House, and he said, wewe rais nimeona hauna roho mbaya. What does that mean when somebody that high up in ODM speaks like that? But for the small people, the MCAs, the MPs, those ones are told now go back to the people. I don't understand why they would do this. On our side, we've not had these kind of issues because our people came in because they believe in our agenda and they believe in the capacity of our leader to steer us through these issues.
Esther, even as much as we are speaking, we have to tell the people of Kenya the truth. Someone is sitting there and believing that a member of parliament's work is to go and fix roads and to go and do all those kinds of things. But we need to go back and look, what is the constitutional mandate of a member of parliament? There are members of parliament who are in that list that have been disciplined, that have never spoken in parliament, and one of their duties is legislation. They have never so much as even proposed a bill, sponsored a bill, sat down to give in their inputs on a bill. But when it comes to now politicking and looking for all these kinds of favors, they want to lie to us that they had gone to look for development. Some of them have been 2-term sitting members of parliament, and those developments that they have been singing in their campaign agenda day in, day out have not yet been done. So what is different? We have to be very honest, the people of Kenya also. That is one. Two, you cannot compare a governor whose co-mandate is and basically they're in the executive bit of it, to a legislator who's supposed to be doing oversight. And this is why, even when you talk about the ward level, the issue we are having is that members of county assembly have been put in a very vulnerable position where they have to go and beg for funds for their ward. They have to go and lobby. And if we are putting members of parliament in that category as well, then really what we are doing is weakening our structures, because it means that these people are going to be very compromised. If I am not earning enough, one, and two, I have to come and beg you for money or for some certain development because I am unable to do it, it means you will tell me I will give you this, but in return you've got to support me. In return you've got to push for this. He's saying he's not seeing that kind of discipline, but I want us to go back to the finance bill. And how many times would you wake up and read, even on media, on the different media outlets that are there, both social media, print and TV, about Kenya Kwanza members that are being punished and were being bullied because of their stand against the finance bill, which was being pushed by the executive. So this thing is on both sides. And in as much as we want to make it look like it's an opposition affair, the truth of the matter is that we need to have responsible legislators. We need to have legislators who are not politicking 24/7. That in as much as you're a politician, you've got to know that you've got a responsibility to the citizens that elected you. And if the citizens elected you knowing very well that you're subscribing to Agenda A, you have to come back to us and tell us why you have made that move.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ruth. That's very elaborate. Mr. Kurenji says, Mambo ni live. Yes, Mambo ni live. Hapa, we're talking about the discipline of political parties. Morora Kebaso says, awesome. Esther, I want to hear these guys putting on black and white what party political ideologies means for members, and that is what Ruth has been talking about, that you have to become clear and say your agenda, why you're subscribing to this party. And when you sway, David, we say the law is very clear. So what do you think is the future of these members who are switching political parties? What does that portray to the electorates?
For me,
Just giving an exact example, do you think if Jalango vies in 2027 with the ODM party, if he's not banned from it, or if he switches to another political party, do you think he's going to get the trust and confidence of his electorates?
Well, for Jalango's case in particular, I think one thing that Kenyans really respect and support is being the underdog. So you can see the whole entire ODM machinery coming against Jalango. Yeah. And what is Jalango's crime? Looking to improve the condition of the people of Langata.
But it is not only Jalango. It's not only Jalango who was.
It's the same thing.
The question is, why is it only Jalango? Because there are so many members of the opposition. Babu Wino is working very well. Why is it now Jalango being attacked?
You see, I think the problem here is just as the PS of Interior put it. Yeah, that you find that sometimes as Kenyans we really elevate leaders to a level where they look down on the people, including MPs and MCAs. So you find that governors are given a pass to go and look for the president and do development. Yeah? And governors are supposed to work with the MCA. So what is this that allows a governor to speak with the president but not the MCA? MPs, and again, this is on the bipartisan agenda, yeah? CDF. Who are you supposed to talk about CDF with if not MPs? So how do you want the president to go and be a part of bipartisan conversations about CDF without talking to parliamentarians? And again, you know, these are three branches of government. Yeah? As much as you're in Azimio, when you're in parliament, you're still in the government. So do we want a government that's divided, that people don't talk because, you know, their leaders have not given them the ability, the permission to talk? Raila Odinga himself goes to look for the president at midnight in Mombasa. Yeah, but dare you be seen and you're a small man with the president, what are you going to do there? So to me, this party discipline issue is a non-issue. The only problem here is that the politicians in Luo Nyanza are going to be sold wholesale. Yeah, and anybody who goes to see the president anashukisha bei ya uko juu. That's why governors are allowed, because then they're with the program. They understand what's being done up there. But these other guys down here, when they're picked one by one, it reduces the wholesale price of ODM in case of a handshake. And I think the handshake is the understanding behind why Azimio is in these bipartisan talks. And that's why they're telling people you have to have party discipline so that we can carry out our agenda here. Mm-hmm. You saw a press conference where Raila Odinga walked out on his co-principals when they said that they're going to discuss the cost of living. He walked out of that press conference, yeah, because he knows what he's doing. He knows his agenda and doesn't want anybody else messing with that agenda. So for me, this party discipline thing it doesn't make sense. And if going by the history of the people who've left ODM, including Uhuru Kenyatta, in fact, the only time Nyayo came out of retirement to speak to Kenyans was when Uhuru parted ways with Raila. He came out to congratulate Uhuru for making a very wise decision.
At what point did these people defect from their parties? The people you're talking about that they defected from their parties, were they in power elected by that political
right now,
party
nobody
or
has defected.
Afterwards?
Nobody has defected. People are working with the president. Everywhere. Look at Senator Coons, the one who comes here and then Kenyans start talking about handshakes. Yeah? Senator Coons came here when Trump was the president, did he not? Mm-hmm. That means he had to be coordinating with Trump. And right now, he's the home senator for Joe Biden, right? And he's still coming here to Kenya to push his country's agenda, which means that he's working with both presidents. He's a senator. Mm. But if it was Kenya, yeah, you'll be told you're in ODM, can you please keep quiet and just be seen? But in their countries, they work together and they strengthen their country's agenda both at home and outside. In fact, even in their parliament, the Congress, the Republicans only have a 5-seat majority. So there's an organization, let's say a small group, a caucus, yeah, called the Freedom Caucus, 45 legislators, both sides. And they are the ones who determine the agendas in that house. Of course, they have their parties. There's discipline and there's everything. In fact, their party structure there is very, very strong. But legislators who come together and say that America is important, we cannot default on our debt, we need to have the right fiscal policies in place, those kind of people control their parliament. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're saying that in this country, we must also not deprive people of their freedom of conscience just because they're in power. Okay. They're still there to deliver to their people. And politics, at the end of the day, is about power. When your people tell you, we have a problem with education, do you have the power to fix this for us or not? Stop telling us about manifestos and what. This is what Ndinyoro has done in Moranga. Primary school education now is 1,000 more because of an intervention that he made. Nobody sent him to do that. That's not even his job, but he made that intervention, and right now, school fees is 1,000. That's what people are paying. So sometimes a leader has to take initiative, go above and beyond, and deliver for his people. So let's not try to block them, telling them about party discipline, and there's nothing about discipline there. There's really nothing about discipline there.
Esther, number one, David has actually shown us exactly what we have been afraid of as Kenyans. You cannot make any issue that is brought up a Raila Odinga issue. You cannot make party discipline a Raila Odinga issue. Cost of living a Raila Odinga issue. Opposition a Raila Odinga issue. Very soon they'll be saying that menstrual cycle is also a Raila Odinga issue. So the truth of the matter is that if we have sat down as a caucus of a political party and we have clearly been told that the president is looking to call members of parliament from this region in a bid to charm them after his visits. So even as you're engaging with him, kindly tread on these lines.
Yeah.
And you go against those lines. No one has said you should not. That is one. Two, you can engage and lobby without being arrogant. And I will use Jalango's example again vis-a-vis Babu Owino. Babu Owino goes to see the president every other time. He lobbies for it every other time. But have you ever seen him being arrogant in media interviews? I want you to take time and watch the interviews by Jalango, and I have nothing against him. But just listen to the media interviews that he did after that. Look at the level of arrogance there. And following by some of the statements that he's been doing, why, again, I say, if truly you believe that you were elected by the people solely on your agenda, and you have done nothing wrong, and you are lobbying for them and you're doing over and above, because as a citizen, if you're doing over and above, I will feel it. Clearly, the people that Ndinyoro represents are feeling it. So if you're going over and above for me as a constituent, I can feel it. Go back to the ballot. Let me elect you as an independent candidate because I believe in you. That is very simple. But if you are scared of going back to the ballot, if you are hesitant of facing a disciplinary committee of your political party, then it puts a lot of question marks. Why I insist that there has to be some discipline in political parties is because we are coming to a time, if this continues, we are going to get to a time whereby political parties are briefcase parties and they're parties for money, as you are saying, wholesale prices and whatnot. Because then I will be able to say that, number one, I'm going to join this party. I'm going to give you X amount so that you can give me X position. I want you to give me the ticket because I want to vie. Because there's no discipline. And when that happens, then I am going to be able to defect when I want, how I want, in whatever way I want. And so if political parties, there's some discipline that is instilled in political parties, then I will know from the get-go, I'm not joining that party because if I don't agree with them at whatever point, they will do ABCD to me. So I need to go with a party that from the word go, I know that I believe in the agenda. Otherwise, why are political parties putting together manifestos and their parliamentarians backing it up if they know they don't believe in it? We've got to come to a place where we've got some sense of moral authority as a nation. You cannot have a member of parliament or a member of county assembly who does not mean their word, who is not straightforward. Then where are we going to as a nation? And this is a habit that we cannot continue to encourage, because right now we are seeing ODM is the one that has done that press statement. I kid you not, before 5 years, you will see UDA doing the same thing. Exactly. Again, I have given you the example of the finance bill. That's why I'm saying it's not a Raila Odinga issue. Okay. It's a political party's discipline issue. And we are seeing it on both sides. Let's not encourage legislators to do what they want, when they want, how they want it. Let's instill some discipline in them.
All right. Thank you for the sentiments, smart sentiments, Ruth. And ladies and gentlemen, talk to me. What do you think about how should the discipline of political parties be carried out in Kenya? And David, I remember you said, starting this conversation, you said, UDA looks at institutionalism and political parties are also institutions. So talk to me, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you think about the future of the discipline of political parties in Kenya. Do they have a future to carry their agenda and ideologies to serve Kenyans, or are they just briefcases, as Ruth says? And moving into 1 year to Ruto's administration, David, should we give him his flowers yet?
given the context in which he assumed presidency, because ever since 2018 they had sidelined him. They were even sponsoring headlines to call him a spectator in government. They were making fun of him, saying they don't see him in State House. So I think we did not have a clear picture of what was going on in the economy. Yeah, only upon assuming office did the president realize just what was happening. Yeah, and I think we can use the analogy. Imagine you're a landlord. Yeah, and you give your house to a tenant. Yeah, and you have another tenant coming up. So you think that when this one is done, this other one will move in, and tell them, yeah, on this date it's going to be ready. But then you get there and you find out somebody had, was starting fires in there, has, uprooted the tiles and what. So you have to fix these things fast. So on the timelines, yeah, there's a bit of a delay with the implementation. But if you look at the structure of the manifesto, yeah, that's what we're following until today. So even the finance bill, and I'd like to correct my colleague here, it's not about coercion. This was about what we had told the people of Kenya we're going to do. So how do we achieve that? And we achieve that through the proposals in the finance bill. If you look at the things that are really there, we subsidize manufacturing for a lot of our people here, farming as well, and this housing fund. We're being told about people being hypocritical and not supporting things they used to support. Well, Azimio manifesto, I think, had 1.5% housing fund, right? How was that going to be raised through taxes, right? Yet, when we tell them that, they wear sufurias on their head. Uhuru Kenyatta himself also had that 0.5% housing fund, which was only at that level because the court stopped him. Yeah? So at the end of the day, everybody in Kenya agrees, at least every political party agrees that we need something like a housing fund. The person who has been able to implement it is William Ruto. So on that one, I think even the people who are against him have to give him his flowers for that. We've been talking about universal healthcare for a very long time in this country. Unfortunately, there's nowhere else the government can get money for these programs except from taxes.
So you increase the taxes
for healthcare, and let me explain why the situation has to be that way. In this country, we've been saying for a very long time that Kenyans are one illness away from poverty. One illness away from poverty. It'll take down your entire family. That day when you get that serious illness, that accident that you're not counting on, how much will you spend? 1,000%, 10,000%, right? So what the government is saying is for 2.75%, yeah, we can put together the funds that make sure that we have a fund for critical illnesses. Cancer is a very big burden in this country, especially in upcountry. People are not getting tested, the equipment has not been there, and even the support the support in terms of personnel has not been there.
Can NHIF pay for cancer?
At this point, it's not been able to because the fund has not been run. Up until now, we've been calling Afya House Mafia House, right? And the president went and cleaned the entire board of KEMSA. That's something that has not been seen before, right? So I think the president has a commitment to making sure that we can reform this NHIF into a social health fund that can take care of critical illnesses, that can reform how we raise money for the insurance and make sure that instead of people going to hospital when they have stage 2 or stage 3 cancer, those community health personnel can come around and figure out where are you. And today, using data, big data, yeah, we can predict a lot of things based on simple information that we have. So this is what we're going to leverage to make sure that the little funds that we have for healthcare can help us. And again, it's not just about you, like maybe a critical illness could take you back into poverty. Think about all the harambes online, digital that you have. How many WhatsApp groups are we in for people who are unwell? When people pass away with hospital bills, we're still paying that money. So when we finally have a fund that takes care of these things, then we'll take those burdens away from the people and allow them to use their money on other things. And this is something that was top of mind during the campaigns. Kenyans were complaining about the cost of credit, and that's why one of the first things the president had to do was the Hustler Fund. Yeah, and he did this by December, regardless of all the pressures that he was having. He didn't even have PSs at that time that put this thing in court, but he managed to get the Hustler Fund going. And this is something that's not even working with the World Bank. And now we're also going to do the same for universal healthcare. And these are things that will benefit millions and millions of Kenyans. Sometimes in this kind of spaces, we might not get that voice from that guy down there because maybe Ruth might have a health insurance card. Maybe you might have a health insurance card. But there's someone somewhere who, if they find that they have cancer today, their life is over. Yeah. So how do we make sure that we can look after that guy? Because we could be in that same situation tomorrow. Yeah. So this is the dilemma. Even the fund to take care of our workers in the Middle East, You know, some Kenyans might feel that, you know, I'm in a different part of the world, maybe I'm in university, why should I pay for someone in the Middle East? Because your relative could go to the Middle East. Who will protect them on that day? Will you then go back to Harambes and what? Can we just, as Kenyans, look at the bigger picture? Because even when now people go to other countries, they pay up to 50% tax. I've never seen a Kenyan in another country wearing a sufuria on the head. And the biggest concern that we've had is, will these funds be managed well? And the response to this is mambo ni matatu. Yeah, the president is clear on this, mambo ni matatu, and people have understood this. In fact, the other day on Langata Road, I saw something that looked like a demonstration. So I looked carefully, and it did not have the characteristics of a demonstration, because these people were using one lane of the road, and the people guiding cars on how to move. And then the colors are green and white, so it was Gor Mahia. And I could see the helmet had Sirkal, but even more interesting, one of the guys at the front had a t-shirt in green and white that says Mambo ni Matatu. So even Raila Odinga's supporters are seeing that the president's new Mambo ni Matatu philosophy is going to work to make sure that these things happen. Even Governor Wambatangi is saying that he's having problems with cartels in his county. He's saying now Mambo ni Matatu. So I think from here on forward, the president's going to be very, very firm with people who are trying to take away the wealth of Kenyans, the property of Kenyans, and the future well-being of Kenyans. And it's with funds like Hustler Fund, things like the Social Health Insurance Fund that will have that kind of protection.
Esther,
how far is the plan implementation? And is the Mambo Matatu move just a bandwagon that we jump into, or do you think it's really going to be effective with his implementation?
Before I come back to that statement, because that is a slogan that Kenyans love, give Kenyans something to run with, and they will be as creative as possible with it. But how you know that David is not being sincere with us in this sitting is he has given the Kenya Kwanza government 100%. I was waiting for him to genuinely tell us that we have done this, we have managed. But this is where we are struggling a bit. So for him to give, we've done this, this is happening, this is gonna happen, he's doing what is called selling hope. In every situation, it cannot be 100%. Even you as an individual, Lester, you cannot tell me you're 100%. Even me, I know I'm not 100%. So when you speak to me and tell me that the government is on course, it is doing everything 100%. Whereas the truth of the matter is we know there are days that they lost because of certain issues such as the protests, such as the court orders when it comes to the CAS, then you're being very insincere with us. However, I will start by giving the president his flowers, as David calls them. One, for the Hustler Fund, which, again, has its ups and downs. It is good that Kenyans are able to access some amount and they're able to go for it. I in fact, on that note, I need to check my limit, but maybe I might as well benefit and start my business. But I do need to give him the props for that. However, the issue with Hustler Fund is that a lot of Kenyans knew that this was coming as a grant and not a loan. So when you tell me that this is the interest, and I'm beginning to ask myself, what do you mean? That is not what I understood. Two, I need to give him props for the judges that he appointed, which is one of the things that he said he would do, and he went ahead to do it. On those two fronts, I give him 100%. Now, on his misses, again, I will go back to gender, because that is my passion. I spoke about the cabinet positions, and he tried to tell me
that you also add the PSS.
That I need to add the PSS and go all the way down.
It's 2/3.
Now, I want you to remember, in your manifesto, you separated those two items.
He said 50%.
He said 50% for cabinet. He said 2/3 gender on elected and appointive positions in the rest of the public sector positions, including government. And those are the two that I will speak about, because the third one, again, really requires parliament. So he separated those two on his own. So you cannot now come back and tell us something different from what you had actually indicated in your manifesto. So on those two fronts, on the 2/3 gender rule when it comes to the elected, I will give him that. However, if you look at some of the boards that have been appointed, we still have a challenge when it comes to the 2/3 gender rule. But at the cabinet level, I'm yet to see my 50%. As a woman, if you voted in UDA and the Kenya Kwanza government based on that particular agenda, then you stand to actually rightfully say, I was deceived, because it has not happened. Two, We have recently heard of a very lucrative and very wonderful promises, because the Kenya Kwanza government is very good in selling hope and giving us promises. So we've got this promise of electric bodabodas by September of 2023, which, yes, you are right, we are in September, because I know that's what you're thinking. But my question is, David, one, do we have the infrastructure to support it? Two, do we have stable lighting to support it? Not so long ago, we had a nationwide blackout. So if our transport system, and I know a lot of people then use bodabodas for transport, if the whole nation has a blackout and we are relying on bodaboda for transport, then what happens? Because what happens in the areas, in the countries where they do have the electric cars and the electric bodabodas, then what happens is they park where there are charging ports, so that then they can charge for the periods that are there. Now, these bodabodas on a day-to-day basis, they do more than 200 kilometers per day. We are talking of Nairobi. We've not yet gone to Karachuonyo, where some of the areas have got no roads. They do more than 200 kilometers. Now, these electric ones can only support 200 kilometers on full charge. So after every 200 kilometers, you need to figure out where you're going to charge it, right? So do we have that infrastructure yet? Because we are already in September, and Mkopa is busy selling them on loan, which again is a whole different issue altogether. But also thirdly, do we have a transition plan? We are very quick to go ahead and give these promises and give timelines, but do we have a transition plan for this motorcycle that we are putting in? What happens to those who have already bought them, especially those on loan? Because what has been happening when we introduced the purchase of bodabodas on loan is that a number of the manufacturers and a number of those who are selling them were now no longer selling them cash. You had to buy them on loan. You had to give in your deposit and then continue the monthly payment, which is, of course, way more expensive. No one was selling it to you. Now, you can imagine I still have maybe 7 more months of paying. Now, you're telling me to start an electric motorcycle. I have to start paying it again, because for Mkopa, which is the only one currently selling, I start at 180,000. And I've not finished my other one. So what is the transition plan? We have not been told. And we are coming to the middle of September. So on that particular front, when it comes to promises, Kenya Kwanza is very good at giving us promises, very good at giving us timelines, but very poor when it comes to the implementation of it. So on that one, we still need to put in some discussion when it comes to that. And to also be very realistic, there's the high cost of living, which is something that we were really looking forward to. Anytime anyone from Kenya Kwanza, and I am sure including their lobby groups, would stand up to speak, one of the things they would sell to us and paint to us is a country whereby the cost of living is going to reduce. Now, you cannot say at that point, when your predecessor was telling you that this cost of living is an international crisis, you said, we don't care. The cost of living has to come down. Now you're in government and you're telling us the same thing, that it's an international crisis. So how do we believe you? Because one day you say A and the next day you say B. You cannot promise me Dubai and take me to the Indigwa. We have to be honest with ourselves. So when it comes to the scorecard, I would only give him props on those 2 items that I've mentioned. The rest, he has to speak a lot. And he's talked about the housing levy and the finance bill. Allow me to talk on those 2 as I close. On the housing levy and all these taxes that are being good, it's good. We like the vision. It is wonderful. But the truth of the matter is Kenyans cannot afford it. We are not saying no to this because we don't want to pay taxes. But if I am struggling to put a meal of 50 shillings on my table, how am I going to pay these taxes? 2, alongside all those taxes that have been imposed on us, organizations, companies, firms are now letting go of people because they cannot afford. The cost of fuel is up, and now you've added all these taxes that as an employer I need to pay. So what am I going to do is I'm going to lower my costs. And which is the easiest cost to do? Labor. To get rid of it is labor. So a lot of companies are now letting go of people. Now, these very people that you're saying need to pay this housing levy now have been let go because of that housing levy. How do you expect them to pay for it? And the question that Kenyans are asking, fine, even if I struggle and pay this, is it going to work for me? Because even if it is not, as he's saying, stolen, but it is not working for me because we've clearly seen that Kenya Kwanza has an issue with implementation. That is the truth. Now, if it is not working for me, why am I paying it? Let me then put this money together. And right now, insurance firms and all these other firms have Alipa na Pole Pole. You have an insurance firm that is telling you, start with 10 shillings. Start with 10 shillings, and that is sure bet, because that is a private organization. We are losing confidence in government day by day, which is a very risky thing, Esther. And that is one of the points that Kenya Kwanza need to start looking at, even as they work on their scorecard. Because truth be told is that the implementation bit of it is where they are failing at.
Is it going to get better, David?
Yes, it is. You see, the difference between UDA and Azimio is that we're methodical about how we do things, yeah? And sometimes, you know, there's no plan that survives contact with reality, yeah? But for us, what we do is we make sure that everything that, we promise, we have to deliver. And we work hard to make sure that we figure out how to do it. So on the cost of living, for example, we cannot lower the cost of living by saying shopkeepers now reduce the price of unga to 70 shillings. That's not going to work, because that reduction in price is going to come from you as a taxpayer. So we're just doing zero work there. So how do we reduce the cost of living? The cost of living is primarily food. Yeah, in countries like the US, you're hearing people saying they're spending up to 50% of their income on food. So if we want to reduce the cost of food in Kenya, what are we talking about? We're talking about unga. Unga is a staple food in this country. Yeah. How do we reduce the price of unga? We go to the shamba. We increase the production of maize in this country. And then that maize finds its way to the shop. Because of the forces of demand and supply, it will come down to a lower price. And that's how it works. So that's what the president has been doing. He got into office and figured out the problem that was there. That food subsidy, by the way, was not removed by this government. It was removed by Munya when they realized that the election has gone. So that was one of the last things that they did in the quiet just before they handed over.
When unga was 100 shillings.
Munya, they said it was 100. I'm not sure Kenyans actually found that.
Kenya Kwanza gave us the price.
But when Ruto got in, sat down with his economic advisory team and with an investment of 15 billion, na kutumia akili pekee, they came up with a plan to fix this situation. So we have fertilizer being provided to farmers. And this used the structure of devolution. This was administered by the county commissioners. So farmers came and registered, told us about how many acres they have, what they need, what they're planting, and they were even given agricultural extension price. The price of fertilizer was dropped from 6,500 to 3,500. This was one of the first things that was done by the president. And right now it's down to 2,500. Yeah. So the president's plan worked to make sure that farmers could plant more, had more fertilizer for this. And everywhere in this country that you go, you'll find that there's maize in the fields. Now, there's some people who are saying that because of the rains that we're seeing, the water stress might affect our bumper harvest. But there's also a plan for that. There's going to be some module to help farmers dry the produce, that there's not too much waste. So the effect of that fertilizer is going to be this. When this maize comes to the market, and the price that the farmers will sell it at, that reduction in the cost of unga is going to be a 350 billion shilling 350 billion shilling boost to the economy, because that's money that they would have been spending on high prices of unga. So at the end of the day, this is a stimulus. That fertilizer has manifested itself into a stimulus. So that's an effect of like 350 extra billion shillings coming to the economy. So Kenyans will have more money to spend on other things. So that's how the cost of living starts to come down. And in fact, I was on an online meeting the other day with some investors from the US who were talking about oil, metals, and agriculture. And I listened to them as they talked about the agriculture strategy for the US in the long term. And I could see so many parallels between what the US has done today to make sure that they're the biggest corn producer and exporter in the world and what William Ruto is doing. It's the same things. You use the same resources, you have the same land that you have, better technology, which in the case of Kenya means better fertilizer, better databases, better ways of figuring out how to reduce post-harvest losses. This is exactly what America did to make sure that they have food security, because as a superpower, if they don't have food security, then the basis of their national security is on shaky ground. And that's what William Ruto is doing. But now the difference is, whereas in America you can mainstream this and even the military is there to help you with that kind of agenda, here in Kenya you say you want to reduce the price of unga, somebody goes and wears a sufuria and says, reduce it further. But it can only be reduced by increasing the production of our farms. And that's what the president is doing. So for me, on the timelines, I'll agree, maybe we can give him like maybe 65% because of all the challenges that he has had. But on fidelity to the manifesto, I don't see anywhere William Ruto has gone away from the manifesto. On the issue, for example, of border borders, when Kibaki became the president, he said that he was going to provide free education for primary and secondary. Nobody understood where this money was going to come from. It was such a radical thing, nobody could believe it, but they gave him space to work, and he did it, and he succeeded. So President William Ruto is saying this. Kenya is going to be a leader in climate change. We're 92% renewable right now. That means that we're one of the best destinations for people to invest, for companies to come and invest in if they want to reduce the carbon footprint. And that's one of the outcomes of the Africa Climate Summit is that there was a commitment of $23 billion. At COP27 in Egypt, he also got a commitment of 3.6 trillion shillings to be invested in Kenya as climate projects. So when people are asking, do we have the infrastructure for these electric borders? That is what the president is doing with this climate agenda, looking for the climate funding to make sure that we can actually afford to implement those policies and have the infrastructure for it and have the investment for it so that this thing can work. And if you can see those borders on the road already, and you know people had been talking about the border industry, like these are very radical people. Could you imagine that they would accept change? But here it is today. So let's give the president time. Even right now, he's in the US. He's working on these things, and it's going to work.
Okay.
And we're partnering with India as well. India, they're doing this thing as well in their country. And this shift is going to be difficult. We're talking about El Nino. What is El Nino? It's an extreme weather event. Shall we wait until these things overwhelm us before we take that plunge and make that shift to more sustainable operations in our country? I say we take the plunge and give the president some room to work and support him even on these agendas. We don't have to oppose just to oppose.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, David. And ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think about Ruto's scorecard in 1 year in his office, because is the plan on track, or has he deviated from the plan? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? And lastly, we are finishing up on this topic of the Africa Climate Summit, which has happened last week. And we saw leaders from different areas of the country, high-level leaders, dignitaries, investors, stakeholders, plunging into Nairobi city and giving their pledges on how they're going to support African countries in combating the effects of climate change. We had pledges, like you've said, we've had pledges from countries. The UAE offered pledged 7.5 billion. USA pledged 13 billion, and it was all optimistic. And do you feel like this climate issue was really addressed through this Africa Climate Summit, Ruth?
First and foremost, I have to again give props to the president for bringing that summit here in Nairobi, because we all know what that did to our economy. Two, I also have to give props to the young people who we saw for the first time were proactively engaged in an issue. We saw young people day in, day out talk about the climate summit, give their solutions, give their positive and negative criticism. We saw them show up in the various forums, and I think that was one of the most beautiful things that I saw when it came to this climate summit. Now, when it comes to the pledges, again, like I say, one issue that we have in Africa is that we are the best when it comes to eloquence. We are the best when it comes to speaking out issues. We are the best when it comes to making pledges, making promises. But I don't know where the rain starts to beat us when it comes to implementation. Because we've got the Maputo Declaration, the Nairobi Declaration of 1982. We've got all these declarations that have been done. But when it comes down to now implementing them and aligning our legislative agendas to them, we miss some. There's somewhere along the way that we miss. One thing that I did not see when we're talking about the climate summit is the oversight plan and that they have for the pledges that were done and the action points that they put together. I did not see how they are going to track the milestones that have been done. There are milestones that have been indicated, there are indicators that have been there, but when it comes to the tracking bit of it, I did not see that. Previously, we've got pledges in the previous different COP conferences that have been done. We've had pledges of the funds that are coming to Africa. But what happens is the next year, African presidents are going to complain that the fund you promised us, one, has not yet come. Two, these same funds have been slashed in a promise still. So it's not that the fund even arrived slashed. You know, it's different that if you've gotten the fund and it's half of what you had. Imagine, this fund has not even come. You're being told still by word of mouth and still through a pledge that it's going to be slashed. So I think that's where my concern is. And for as long as we keep on doing these beautiful conferences, we keep on pledging and we are not doing anything when it comes to implementation, then we are going to have an issue. And a lot of things that we saw in the climate summit is that almost every group was catered for in terms of the special interest groups. We saw the first lady of the country also host a delegation of women just to talk about, the how the women in the energy sector can contribute towards that particular agenda. And again, my biggest issue remains the tracking of the oversight, the tracking of the indicators that have been put there. We still miss when it comes to that implementation. But over and above, if you ask someone in Karachuonyo constituency, we had the climate summit, what do you think about the pledges? And as I was telling you guys before we started, the first thing they'll ask me is, what is the climate summit? How does it affect me? So what I would love to see moving forward is have our elected leaders go down to their respective constituencies and wards and explain to the common citizen that this thing is affecting you in this manner. Use the local examples that are there. Use Masinga Dam, use Sondu, use the examples that are within the constituency for them to be able to understand what it is, why it was important for the president to engage all these presidents in that kind of discussion. It is only then that then we are also able to see some sort of effort from the citizens, because it would be good to see a citizen-centered action plan. Because if the government is doing all these things at their level, and as citizens we are doing the exact opposite, then there's going to be, the efforts are sort of counterproductive. And finally, we also had the different genuine opinions when it came to the thoughts of the presidents. We had the presidents that snapped attending the climate summit because of their thoughts on the West. We've got the president that attended and still complained about the West. I think it's time that the presidents of Africa came together and put a solution for Africans minus the West. Because the truth of the matter is, majority of the funds that we get from the West are squandered in corruption. So do we really need those funds if either way when they arrive, they're not going to be used? Mm-hmm. They're going to end up in people's pockets. So do we really need those funds? Mm-hmm. That is a question we need to ask ourselves as electorates. But we need a solution by Africans for Africans. Otherwise, if we get these funds, then what stops them from telling us, we've given you funds, you need to do ABCD, or we are not giving you the 30% that is remaining. Mm-hmm. And so we are still going to have modern day colonialism, which is what we're trying to move away from. And finally, the issue still around the funds that are being pledged, because that is one of the biggest pledges that has come through when it comes to the climate summit, is climate change is a new HIV and AIDS when it comes to civil society. So you find that any CBO, any NGO is now moving towards speaking on climate change, even if it was not in their agenda initially. Now, what this does is that we've got a mixture of anything. It is like Nyoyo, Gideri, right? So we've got those who really are working towards climate change and are actually going for, you can see tangible solutions that they're bringing on the table. And then we've got those that are going on the wave. But what we need to do is those that are going with the wave because they need their funds and they need to keep the organization running. Let's use the platforms that they have available to get to the grassroots level, because this is an elitist conversation. And even with the summit, it still remains an elitist conversation. It needs to be cascaded down and disseminated to the grassroots level. Otherwise, even the mitigations that the president is thinking of doing will only go so far, because he'll be doing this, he'll be putting all these laws, and we'll have someone at the grassroots level doing the exact opposite. It's just like the ban on plastics, in as much as, yes, it has gone very far. But I can tell you today, at the border of Kenya, Uganda, they're not checking plastic. So plastic is still coming in. So we need to be able to ensure that this is something that is owned as well by Kenyans.
Mm-hmm. Very well. Thank you so much, Ruth. And to you, David, as we finish up, the president signed the climate bill the Friday before the conference, and also he insisted that Africans are the least emitters of carbon emissions, yet they're the most affected by climatic change, and he pushed for climate financing. Is this climate financing do you think it's finally going to work? Because we've not seen it work before. And were the most pressing problems by African countries, and including Kenya, were they addressed?
I think when it comes to climate change, we're at a beginning. Ruth has mentioned HIV/AIDS as an agenda that was being pushed by practically everyone, and that's because there's a philosophy that you cannot solve all of a country's problems. So if you want to fix your country, you look at the biggest problem. Yeah? And at that point, the biggest problem was HIV/AIDS. This disease was killing people, and we had no idea what our next generation is going to look like. So you stop that problem, and then you look at the next problem. Now that our people are living long enough, how do we give them free education so that they can develop themselves as humans and take advantage of the economic growth? So right now with climate, what we're seeing in Greece is that they went and got a whole year's rainfall in, was it 3 days? And it's wiped out 25% of the agriculture. So that is an existential risk to a country. Whether or not we're talking about it, that's an existential risk. That can go and undo everything we're working for. Yeah? And our solution is simple. At independence, our indigenous tree forest cover was 35%. Now it's 11%. What is the president saying? Let's plant 1.5 billion trees in 10 years. That's a very logical thing to do for our country. Yeah, we just come from 5 failed rainy seasons. This year, God has blessed us with rain, and the president has delivered fertilizer to the people. Now we're waiting for a bumper harvest. Yeah. So I think when it comes to climate, as much as it's not an issue that Kenyans are talking about, it's no longer an elite conversation. Because if you look at even the structure of the climate funding, and this is why John Kerry from the US was saying that Ruto's leadership is being felt. If you look at something like the Hustler Fund, yeah, the president went and said that the problem we have with these funds is that we have middlemen who go and misuse this money. So what am I going to do to fix this problem? I remove these middlemen. The committee is you and your phone. You get that money. Ruth has said that this money does not get down to Mwananchi level, which has been true throughout. But that has changed this time around. Only 10% of climate money used to get to the ground. Now all of it is going to the ground. The World Bank is providing a financial, there's a financial system they're using called FLOCA. This provides money down to the ward, to the village. And they're using the devolution structure. That's why governors are present at
the African Climate Summit.
Yeah. So this again is happening in Kenya because Kenya has the political infrastructure that allows us to get these things down to the Mwananchi. So that issue about it being an elitist conversation, maybe the thing that was happening at KICC is elitist, but the fund itself is not elitist because there's no committee. It's going down to the county. Yeah. So even that Mwananchi who in Karachuonyo might not understand climate change 100%, guess what? They're going to get funded. Those funds are going to reach that level. Yeah. So I think that the main purpose of this thing was Africa gets a raw deal when it comes to financing in general. Yeah. We pay up to 8 times as much as other people do for credit. So the place where we could raise money is on climate because we only produce 3% of the emissions. So this is a place where we can begin immediately. Yeah. So this serves 2 purposes: 1, to bring financing to the continent, and 2, to work against extreme climate changes. So I think that our issues are being solved slowly, and that's why other heads of state were here. Not so much to support us, but to learn from us also. The president of, I think it was Sierra Leone, was complaining and telling the Western people, hey, you guys, you need to also give us the kind of money you're giving to Kenya. Yeah. And he was saying that, William Ruto, I'm going to follow in your footsteps so that I can also see what I need to do so that I can bring this money down directly to my people, down to the villages. So those concerns that we had about climate before are changed now. And in fact, when the president was speaking about that FLOCA fund by the World Bank, yeah, he mentioned in front of all those wazungus from everywhere in the world that mambo ni matatu. He told the governors, mnajua mambo ni matatu, and they said yes, and they clapped. Yeah, and that's how that money that people are saying was being spirited away for corruption that prevents them from even giving out the full funds to completion. That's now going to be an issue of the past. Because you can see how eager and willing people are to invest once the proper structures are there. The proper structures are there, it'll get to Mwananchi, and corruption is just a thing of the past when it comes to this kind of projects.
Ruth,
allow me to just jump in because even as we are speaking about this, there is the ideal picture of it and there is the reality on the ground. Yes, there is the idea of taking funds to the counties. And yes, it is being included in the budgets and it is going, and that discussion is happening. But these members of county assemblies that are supposed to be oversighting the executive when it comes to the budget of the county, do they know matters of the finance, of the climate change? Are they aware? Have they been sensitized about it? Have they been trained on it? I will tell you for free, that is one of the biggest gaps that have been there. And that's why you see organizations like the Kenya Young Members of County Assemblies going to say that when it comes to climate change, we need to ensure that there are actually tangible solutions and tangible end products that are there, which then means One, taking the MCAs through that discussion, ensuring that they know what climate change is, and that when they are oversighting that money, they know that this money is going to be used in this way, that is going to benefit us in this way. Number two, we are also looking at public participation. When public participation is happening, are these citizens able to actually go and have this discussion, knowing very well that they understand what climate change is? Three, a lot of times we see this money going back because it's not used. And it's not used because they don't know how to use it. So it beats the purpose to say that this fund is going to the grassroots level when eventually it's coming back. So why is it going in the first place if they don't know how to use it? But also finally, which is one of the most saddest things, is when it comes to the climate bills and climate acts that are in the counties. You find that County X has copy-pasted the bill for County Y, not knowing that the dynamics are very different. The population is different. The amount, the geographical bit of it is also very different. And even as you flip through the bill, you'll find that when it is County Y's bill, you'll still see mention of County X here and there because it's just been copy-pasted. So even as we are talking about sending these funds to the ground, and this is, as I was saying earlier on, my biggest problem with Kenya Kwanza, we are sitting here and David is very excited telling us that this money is going to the grassroots level, all of it, but it's going to come back. If you don't tell these people what needs to be done, and that's why I keep insisting, you're giving us these promises, you're giving us all these good things, but do you have the infrastructure to support all these things that you're saying? Have you put in mechanisms to ensure that it's going to support your activities? Because if you're doing this, if you're sending money, for example, and you're giving us all these good things, and you don't have mechanisms to support the implementation, then what you're doing is counterproductive. You're like a ship that has been, the grazing whereby you put it on a peg and it just circulates round and round. It doesn't feed from anywhere outside that. That is what we are doing. We are going round in circles and we are not moving outside this circle. Money is going and coming back. Discussions are going and it ends there. But we need to move past that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, all these countries that have come to learn from us are going to catch up with us. And then what? Mm-hmm. And then what?
Thank you so much. I suppose that is your parting shot also.
Yes, that is my parting shot.
David, do you have a parting shot?
Once again, I think, especially on this climate issue, which might turn out to be Ruto's biggest legacy, I think we're at the beginning as well, yeah? So when you're talking about
We've had
educating
discussions
people
about climate change since 1980.
and MCAs,
How this is the beginning.
then allow those MCAs to come to State House and the president can explain to them how this
State House?
Yes, he's saying that the MCAs do not know. So let them go to State House and be informed on how this module works and how they can deliver this for their people. There's no part of this country where there are no World Bank projects or other donor-funded projects, and they're done and they're finished. The problem when it comes to donor-funded projects is corruption. And that's why the president said, Mambo ni matatu. Yeah, so that one we're going to deal with it. So first we get the commitment to get the funds. Then we get the funds, then we operationalize. And operationalizing means now mainstreaming the same way it was done for HIV and other issues. Yeah. So that's not an issue. The issue was, where are these funds going to come from? Now that has been secured, yeah, the next stop is now Dubai for the next climate conference, where they go on to add on to these things. So sometimes let's be optimistic about our country. If you can see 23 heads of states coming here to figure out what's going on, surely we must be doing something right as a country. And let's not, always be in this Azimio versus UDA thing. Sometimes President Ruto can do something good. Yeah. He can
like
do
the ones I said,
these are innovations
like
that
the
he's
ones
making,
Ruth said.
and these are innovations that he's doing, and these are things that will help our country eventually. I remember when the MP John Kiari went and introduced a bill to go and plant trees on the sides of roads. Which Kenyan did not support that? All Kenyans support that. Is that not climate change by itself? Because the cars are emitting, yeah? And even when you're driving, when you get to a place where there are trees, it's cooler, right? So this is something every Kenyan can understand. When you say you want to plant trees, Moi did this in his reign, and Kenyans everywhere did it, and they understand this. Yeah, the Mao issue, what was it about? It was about our water tables. So Kenyans understand this issue. So maybe sometimes the English that is used at KICC is not the English that is used at the ground, but we're talking about the same thing essentially. So I think this climate issue is just the same as everything else. And if you look at the thinking and the planning, it's the same kind of design as the Social Health Insurance Fund, same as the Hustler Fund. It's the same kind of thinking. How do we devolve these resources and make sure they get to the people without middlemen stealing from them?
All right.
And this was the big promise that Ruto had, that he's going to work for those hustlers. And this is exactly what he's doing. So in fact, now, the people who are angry with the climate summit are those people who used to eat 90% of the money. Yeah, those are the people who are angry right now and fighting it. Yeah, now because 100% is going to the ground, they're saying no, MCs have not been trained. Allow them to go to State House, they learn a few things.
All right.
I know I said that was my parting shot, but I just want to tell David, as Ruth Bolo, and I know majority of Kenyans, we are praying for the Kenyan Kwanza government, because if they succeed, we succeed. If they fail, then even us, we fail, because really our economy goes down. So mine is just to pray for their implementation, which is the biggest challenge they're having now, though they will not admit it, and to just pray that they actually succeed. That is my biggest prayer.
Thank you so much. And I don't think it's an Azimio or a Kenya Kwanza battle or what, because as she has said, if the government fails, we feel it. So it's never about Kenya Kwanza and Azimio. It's about the objectivity, as we've had in this discussion by my two lovely guests, David Maina and Ruth Bolo. Thank you so much for making time for us today. Thank you for joining into this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, if you missed it, you can catch it up later. Leave your comments in the comments section. And it's been real. It's a wrap. Thank you so much. Stay safe and see you next time.